Danny, do you remember our Stitch Fix episode from a few weeks back when I said I've been using the TikTok girlies as my stylist? Do you recall?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
So today I am wearing one of the outfits recommended by the TikTok girlies. I went to Old Navy and I bought an oversized shirt to pair with leggings because that's one of the, quote, outfit formulas.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. You shared that spreadsheet. Yes. It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yes. One of the TikTok girlies put together a whole spreadsheet of outfit formulas. Anyway, I decided to try this particular one. And I don't know. I'm kind of feeling myself over here. So.
But I thought you don't dress for the outside.
You know what? I might change my mind because, the TikTok girls are out here getting me together. So
right.
Stitch Fix, you got to watch your back out here because
right.
It's free and it's easy. And I went to Old Navy, so obviously I didn't spend a lot of money just in case, I ended up hating it. But here we are.
Now I got to try one.
You got to do it. You got to do it. Hello and welcome to Not Another Business Podcast, where we break down business news and cultural events according to the rules we've entirely made up. I'm KJ Miller, ex-corporate consultant and current CEO and co-founder of Minted Cosmetics.
And I'm Daniela McCarthy, ex-corporate lawyer and current general counsel at Ness. And fun fact, KJ and I have been friends since our Harvard acapella days because we are that cool, folks. Disclaimer before we start the show, the views we express are our own and not those of our companies. Today on the show, we are talking about queer-focused neobank Daylight. They have been in the news recently because of a lawsuit that was filed on March 31st in federal court alleging a number of bad deeds, including age and wage discrimination, whistleblower retaliation, and fraud. And there was a New York Magazine article that had quite the title, The Meltdown of a Gay Bank, that came out the same day. And so folks are now talking about them. And we thought, so many questions this bank raises.
So many questions, including, are we allowed to call it a gay bank? I don't know the rules here. So. But I don't know about you, but before that article came out, I had never heard of them. And so it was both my introduction to the idea of a gay bank and this particular gay bank, and now what appears to be the meltdown of a gay bank. So many, many questions all at once.
Yeah. Excited to get into them.
Me too. Can't wait. Right after our shameless plug. Okay, Danny, what are you plugging this week?
I am plugging, as always now, the Ness card. I don't know if you've seen, but we have our new brand ambassador who was just announced this past week, Jonathan Van Ness. Mm-hmm. He's very excited about the card. We are very excited about him. And along with the announcement of his endorsement, we also have new benefits that are going live. This week, I'll be checking out the Magic Spoon benefit, which is just $8 off a month, any Magic Spoon order. For anyone who doesn't know, those are sugar-free cereals. I love cereal, and I'm sad that as an adult, I can't eat it at every meal. But with Magic Spoon, I might be able to. So I'm going to give that a try. And if you're interested in brands like that, check out the Ness card and go to nesswell.com to apply.
Awesome. Let's get back to the show.
All right, it's TikTok o'clock, folks. Before we jump into our main topic, we want to wade through our social media comments and give our thoughts on your thoughts. So KJ, what are folks saying online?
Well, this week, something a little different. As many of you may recall, we did an episode on the 4-day work week a few weeks ago. And I mentioned on the show that I was going to ask my team to come up with a proposal for how Minted could actually move to a 4-day work week. And I'm excited to share that we've done it. They did put together a really amazing proposal. We worked through it together. And I posted about it on social this week, and I've gotten a lot of great comments, including from some of my investors. So some of what people have said is, smart KJ, very dope. I'm sending this to my manager and my manager's manager. This is amazing. I'm loving the work-life balance. And then I got a lot of people saying, how many people are in the company and just questions around how we're making it work. I had people DMing me actually asking me how we made it work, even though that's what I explained in the video. So, So, I just wanted to circle back to this because, we did an episode on it and I wanted to give the update that my team has moved to the 4-day work week. But also, I thought it was really nice just seeing how many people love this idea, how positive of a reaction that I've gotten, not just from other people, but also from investors. So, I thought that was nice. I wanted to share.
Remind me, do you guys have full-time customer service folks at Mented?
Our customer service team members are part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah.
But so do you have 5-day coverage, but everyone's working 4 days a week or less, I guess?
Yeah. So we have coverage every day of the week for customer service. Mm-hmm. We just don't have coverage for every 9 to 5, 7 days a week. So some days there's less coverage, but we do have coverage every day.
Makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. My mom, when she listened to that episode, was like, come on, Daddy, what are you talking about? And then, I don't know, a few weeks later, there were all these additional news articles about companies that were moving to 4-day work weeks, right? Including pretty established companies. And she was like, oh, maybe you're onto something. And now you're doing it.
Maybe we're on to something. I mean, look, I got to tell you, it's made a huge difference for me and my personal health. And that's what every single person on my team has said. Literally, we were chatting about it at our team meeting on Tuesday. And one of my team members wrote in the, in the chat, she was like, not to be dramatic, but it has literally changed my life. And so,
wow.
I was like, no, but same. You don't realize how, I don't know, how much stress you hold until you get an extra bit of time to let go of it and to spend a little bit more time on yourself. And, I'm really grateful. And I'm grateful that my team, they really are the ones who did the work to figure out how we could make it happen. And we haven't lost any productivity. Some of my team members, because we've been surveying, have said they actually feel like they are more productive because they have more energy Monday through Thursday, knowing they're getting that extra day off. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been going well. I will continue to keep you guys updated because we are still considering it a test, right? There's still a world where we could go back. But as we spoke about during our episode, the cost of that 5th day goes up if you try to go back. I'll keep you guys posted, but so far so good.
I love it. Congrats, Mented fam, on getting that 1 day back.
Thank you.
All right. So should we get into our main topic?
Absolutely, we should. And Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you to hit us with the facts. First of all, for those who aren't familiar, which I'm guessing is a lot of folks, what is Daylight? Okay.
So Daylight, the company name is actually B Money Inc., but got started in 2020 with a guy named, I'm going to butcher it, it's a Slavic name, Matej, let's say Vtachnik. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he is the CEO of a company called Vacuum Labs, which says they build teams and tech for other fintech companies. So he actually gets the idea for an LGBT plus focused bank based on the premise that that community has particular financial needs. And he brings in this guy, Rob Curtis, initially as the chief product officer, but he eventually becomes the CEO of Daylight. And Rob Curtis brings in 2 other folks, Billy Simmons, who becomes COO, and Paul Barnes-Hodgett, who becomes CTO. And then Vacuum Labs provides 6 engineers to get this company off the ground, and Daylight is off to the races. That's kind of how the company starts, which is pretty interesting. And the New York Magazine article did not cover that.
And so now, what exactly, when they say it's an LGBT plus focused bank, what does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah. So the whole premise of this company is that the LGBT plus community engages with money differently. That it can be more expensive to be LGBT plus, and that there can be friction in your relationship with your bank if you're a member of that community that the cis community doesn't have to deal with. So examples that the current CEO Curtis has provided in various press is the LGBT plus community spends about the same proportion of their income on discretionary spend, but is nevertheless about 20% less likely to have a savings account, period. The LGBT plus community is 20% less likely to own investments like stocks, a quarter less likely to own a mutual fund, and they estimate that only 30% of the LGBT community has any estate planning. Okay, so these are examples, and keep in mind, we have not vetted these. These are examples that the CEO has provided.
Well, because I was going to ask, does he give any other stats about why these things would be true, right? Like, because if I told you 20% of Black people were unbanked, and I think the number might be higher, I could then say because of the poverty levels in the Black community, and actually banking is an expensive endeavor. So there's a lot of data to back up the why, the Black community is so underbanked. Did he give similar such data?
Well, there are some like kind of, I don't know if it's justifications or reasons why that might be true that do seem plausible. And that kind of goes to his point about it being expensive to be in the LGBT community. So one point that I thought made a lot of sense to me is often LGBT community members lose the support of their families or their parents after they come out. And so that population of people is more likely to have college debt than, say, cis members who have generational wealth and family wealth supporting them when they go off to school. There's also the point that it can be expensive to undergo certain like medical treatments that are unique to the community, including like hormone replacement therapy or any kind of gender affirming surgery. Now that's a narrow percentage or proportion of the LGBT community. Not everyone in that community undergoes those therapies, but that's another example. Then there's also just the general point about like discrimination in banking being less likely to be able to obtain loans that might promote your wealth. Also, point about salaries actually generally being lower, also because of discrimination in employment. To the extent that someone's membership in an LGBT community is something that's perceptible by a prospective employer or an existing employer. So those are kind of the reasons. And then there's this idea of friction in traditional banking, and Daylight has really focused on this, which is, how painful it might be for someone to even just have to use their given name as opposed to a chosen name, like in the process of banking. And so that's an example of a pain point that an LGBT-focused bank would address.
Okay.
So that's kind of the premise. And so the idea for Daylight was to provide a differentiated experience for this community. So Daylight was supposed to provide unique features like a seamless card experience that allows you to pick your own unique name, your preferred name, rather than using your given or dead name. They were also promising to book sessions with expert LGBTQ financial coaches, right? So bringing up financial literacy of this community, facilitating peer-to-peer advice from the digital community, so from other Daylight members, rewarding spend that would be meaningful to the LGBT community. So whether that be at merchants or businesses that affirmatively provide a service for the community, or merchants or businesses that just outwardly promote their support of the community. And then also personalized recommendations to members to alert them when they're spending at such a merchant, or when they're supporting like a politician who has been particularly supportive, or the opposite, right? So like, don't spend here, for example. Now, I do think it's also important to note that Daylight was not the first LGBT bank, period. There is another bank called Pride Bank, but that's Brazilian based. That was kind of the first proof point for this type of bank. So Daylight was just the first US based LGBT bank. So that was kind of the initial premise. And in June 2021, Daylight announced a $5 million Series Seed to make it happen.
Okay. All right. So how did all that go?
Well, so that's the initial premise, and there really isn't that much out there in terms of hard numbers for how it's gone since. What we do know is that in November 2022, so this is over a year later, they announced a Series A, where they raised another $15 million. But the business shifts a bit. And so at this point, Rob Curtis is still CEO, and he's pitching Daylight as still a company to build the financial products and services to help queer people live their best lives. And they're really pushing a different product called Daylight Grow, which is a subscription plan that's designed to help prospective queer families with financial planning, emphasis on families. So the idea was to offer a personalized family creation plan covering financial, legal, logistical milestones tailored to individual states and needs, right? So these family planning concierge services to provide financial advice and logistical support to queer families or queer prospective families, right? So attorneys, recommendations for IVF and surrogacy clinics, in-person financial and fertility education events, like that is the new push for this company. So it's no longer just a savings account with a debit card that has your chosen name, but this subscription-based kind of family planning service, again, with a focus on LGBT families.
What are you subscribing to, though, in this scenario? Is it like a newsletter, or what are you subscribing to?
So unclear, just based on the website. They do, okay. I think it's a number of things. I think there's probably an app, right? There's an app. There's just a service. There's an app where they're connecting you to surrogacy clinics, IVF clinics, family attorney networks. Now, as a member of Daylight Grow, you do have access to what they're now calling Daylight Money, which is all of the banking features that they initially built. So you can tie all of these things, these things together, right? So you're using Daylight Money for, hopefully now you have a savings account or a bigger savings account, and that money plus all these concierge family planning services you're using to actually make this goal of like of having a queer family realized, right? And so at the time of the raise in November 2022, they're saying that this product, Daylight Grow, is launching in early 2023. And indeed, it seems to have launched. You can go check it out on their site, or at least a description of it. Daylight Money is still there, but based on what's reported, Daylight Money is their only additional new signups are if you are purchasing Daylight Grow.
Interesting. Okay, so that I feel like kind of brings us to this article and the meltdown of a gay bank. Mm-hmm. So where did this go wrong?
Yeah, and so look, I have to say I do think the title was pretty clever because I don't know that the bank has melted down yet. You know, like this article might be precipitating it, because it is very compelling and interesting, but doesn't seem to have melted down just yet. But but the whole point of why the author wrote this article entitled that way is because there was a lawsuit that was filed on the 31st of March by 3 former employees who are alleging age and wage discrimination, whistleblower retaliation, and fraud. And through that filing and this New York Magazine article, basically we're getting the image of like yet another kind of crazy, questionably larger than life CEO who encourages questionably larger than life parties, who has this crazy kind of vision, who for some reason, I don't know why this is always a thing, but creates a kind of hostile work environment and like may or may not have dabbled in fraud to get his company to where it is today. Right. So yeah. So like specifics are like, we have the CEO who, mind you, like didn't have work authorization in the US, but is building a US fintech company. Right. So when he opens his account, this is just like a funny tidbit, but when he opens his account, he apparently uses the personal information of another founder to open an account because he himself did not have a social security number or a taxpayer number. And you can't open a financial account in the US without those things. But, he did it with his co-founder's information, then switch things on the back end. Okay, so little things, but fine. One of the things that the article in the New York Magazine focuses on is the celebration of this Series A, which, as I just mentioned, closed in November 2022. 2022, excuse me. But apparently this company has been celebrating it for like a year before then, right? So they have this crazy retreat in Mexico, and reportedly the CEO, Rob Curtis, is celebrating, we did it, right? It was a $50,000 retreat, and they're celebrating, we did it, the first like gay bank to close a Series A. Mind you, like nothing had been closed then, right? There was an article published in June 2022, actually a study in Fast Company called LGBTQ Gen Zers are ditching the boomer approach to money and finance. And the CEO provided a bunch of the data to support that study. And remember, this is June 2022, so just a few months before the Series A closes. And it's been revealed in this New York Mag article that he just made the numbers up. He totally made the numbers up that he gave to Fast Company. People inside the company were questioning it, like we're not sure, but I guess no one was like, no, this is false. But no one has confirmed these numbers are true, and he himself has confirmed that he made the numbers up. And so actually, Fast Company has pulled the study. If you go on their website now, they say, we now question the veracity of the study. It's to avoid confusion. We're pulling it. So you can imagine if he's like just making up numbers, making up surveys that never happened to put in a public article. He probably was doing something similar with investors right, that he was pitching this A to.
I mean, making up numbers, stealing identities. He seems a little sketch. He seems a little bit sketch.
Right. So those are questionable choices just on the like, is this business real or not? How is it doing? Right. But then there's also the like environment he's creating internally at the company. Right. So employees report him saying things like, there's no room for doubt. You're either with us or you're not. Having massive parties where he's serving employees edibles who then feels compelled to take them because the CEO is the person distributing them. Right. And then saying things like specifically with respect to Daylight Grow. Oh, God, I feel even odd quoting the quotes, but let's get all the gays donating sperm and all the poor queer women being surrogates. Okay, this is apparently something he wrote on Slack. There's a lot of poor queer kids who could make some easy cash. Kind of creepy, but who are we to judge? And then floating the potential tagline, the bank that made me pregnant.
Okay. Okay. I would just like to go on record and say, putting something like that out there, like in a written message, all the poor queer kids can be surrogates. So now if you're poor, you should just be willing to farm your body out. As someone who has been pregnant, I would not wish it, quite honestly, on my worst enemy if it wasn't something that they wanted to do for themselves. So to just put something so cavalierly on a Slack channel, to me, I feel like I've heard what I need to hear about this man. Right. It's just, that's right. Wild to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the piece of who are we to judge, I might agree with on its own. I'm not going to necessarily judge someone who decides that they need to donate eggs or that they can be a surrogate if that's an opportunity to make money that they feel like they want to take advantage of. But to create a company to intentionally target a group of vulnerable people and encourage them into that area of, using their body in that way, just basically to take advantage of them, I think is exactly. Absolutely unacceptable.
Exactly. No judgment at all for anyone doing what they need to do or want to do, but to speak about something so sensitive and so important and so life altering in such a cavalier way, to me, just says a lot about his character.
Totally. Okay. Yes. And so that is probably all you need to know, but there is a little bit more, just in terms of also then like the work environment he created within the company, right? So obviously he is purportedly setting out to create better lives for the LGBTQ community. And a number of employees who join the company are drawn to that promise and are themselves members of that community. And you have quotes from employees who are saying that they've actually never experienced a more hostile environment and have never felt more misled because of the promise of the company and just how short it fell, right? So there are people who are saying that Rob Curtis misgendered them consistently, used their dead names in meetings, right? Like not respecting chosen names, which again is supposed to be one of the main features of your product.
Yeah.
Broadcasting gender affirming surgeries that employees had without consent to do that, and just generally behaving in an offensive way. So there's that piece too. And so that's kind of where we are today, right? So Rob Curtis is still the CEO. This legal battle is just getting started. Daylight is operating. And so those are the facts.
My goodness. I guess feels like a good time to get into some speculation, but man, what a set of facts we're dealing with here. And I know you were thinking for speculation, we should really boil it down to two sort of areas. One, the founder and CEO, Rob Curtis himself, and all of our thoughts there. And then two, the actual business that Daylight is and the questions raised by the business that they're sort of trying to be or purporting to be. And I think breaking it down into those two topics makes sense. And I guess I will start off by just saying, as it relates to the founder, for me, that's one thing that I tend to say a lot is I think there's a pretty big difference between being a good founder and a good CEO. Now, I'm not sure that he's good at either, but it certainly sounds to me, based on some of the things that he said to employees in meetings, based on his Slack messages, based on his willingness to just lie to the press and whatever, to me, all of that sounds like someone who's not a good CEO, but potentially someone who could have been a good founder, because I think to be a good founder, you've got to be willing to jump off cliffs. You've got to be incredibly scrappy. You've got to be able to hear no a million times and still think that your thing is the thing. And it sounds like he's got that, right? He's got the belief in himself, the pride, the ego, the charisma, the charm, whatever, to get into these rooms and convince other people of his vision. I think you need that as a founder, but to be a good CEO requires real people skills and real polish. And that, to me, is what it sounds like this man is definitely missing.
I mean, obviously, I'm going to agree with all that. I would actually bring us back to the founder piece, though, too, which is he a good founder if he's out here lying everywhere? Like, is that okay? Like, but I don't want us to say, because I don't think this is true, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but I think it's worth clarifying that all of the stuff around inflating or making up facts, like, we're not saying that that's bad for a CEO, but good for a founder, right? Like, that's still bad for a founder. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, stealing identities and lying to the press, I think is bad. But do I think, and now let me not get myself in trouble, but do I think most founders have at one point or another embellished on the journey? Yes, 100% I do. I think, this idea of fake it till you make it, this idea of, I'll tell you one thing. I can just straight up say this. I don't mind saying this. The first at least 10 product reviews on every single one of my lipsticks, I wrote. Okay. I wrote them. All right. And I can say that because now every single one of those lipsticks has over 500 to 1,000 product reviews. Right. So my 10 are not negatively impacting the average.
And you were, in fact, a consumer of your own products.
Right. And I did wear those lipsticks. Okay. So, but that is a form of embellishment, right? Like, cause it's not like I didn't sign each review my name, and I also remember trying to be real creative and have a different tone of voice for each one. Okay. So, and you know what? And I'm fine with that. And I'm fine with any founder who does that, because to me, that's just you trying to get your business a little bit further along. No one's getting hurt by that. Right. But I think that that's a completely different thing than what this man is doing when it comes to just making up hundreds of data points about, LGBT youths and their banking habits. And then not only making it up, but giving it to Fast Company. That I would not do. Right. And even I actually think even at some point, Amanda and I took down our fake product reviews because we were like, I guess we don't need these anymore, huh? But yeah, I think most founders have embellished something at some point, whether it's on your with your product, whether it's like in an investor pitch, maybe you have 8,000 users and you round it on up to 10,000, right? Like maybe I do think part of being a founder is figuring out, like, is being scrappy and figuring out where can I, bend the rules as opposed to completely breaking the rules. I don't know. I think that's pretty normal.
I guess it's normal, but there has to be a line. And obviously this guy doesn't know where it is. And there are plenty of people who don't know where it is, right? Like Elizabeth Holmes didn't know where the line was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we talked about potentially covering the JPM acquisition of Frank. Is it Frank or Frankie?
Yeah, Frank,
right? And what's followed since, which is, for those who aren't familiar, the CEO now being criminally charged for fraud. Right. Because at least according to the case, or according to the indictment, she told JPM that she had 4 million people on a wait list. JPM buys this company, and turns out only about 130,000 emails are real.
Right.
And there are, there's evidence of her paying someone to make fake emails, right? So there's a line. That person doesn't know where it is either, right?
100%. And the thing is, there is a line, and, I guess you just sort of have to hope and trust that most people will know where that line is. But I'm sure, we talk about the Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. We talk about this founder of Frank. We talk about Curtis now, Daylight. For some people, that line gets blurrier and blurrier and blurrier. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of this case we did at HBS, where it was a case on embezzlement. And they actually brought the man from the case study who was both accused and convicted of embezzlement and went to jail. They brought him in as the case protagonist, probably to scare us straight, to be like, do not be another Harvard grad out here embezzling funds. Okay. So, but anyway, they brought this man to class, and I remember he said, he was like, everybody steals from the company. Have you ever used a printer to print your own personal documents? That's stealing from the company. I said, sir, do not try to compare me printing my little, whatever, Taylor Swift tickets to you stealing millions of dollars. We're talking about two different things. But I feel like he was making a similar point, which is, there's a line, and at what point are you doing something that's just a little bit fuzzy, a little bit gray, versus no, you've crossed a big, bold, black line that you absolutely should not have crossed. Now, I thought his example was ridiculous because, sir, I'm going to print where I want to print, but I did understand what he was saying, which is there are some things you think of as being you're bending the rules, but who cares? But at a certain point, when does bending the rules become breaking the rules? And so, yeah, it's not like there's a book that says you can bend these 10 rules, but these 12 don't. So it is up to, I guess, founder discretion, and discretion sounds like something Curtis at least very much lacks. Right.
Yeah, I think maybe, and this is why lawyers maybe don't make great founders, is I tend to be more risk averse, I think, in terms of how much you can embellish, I think there's a difference between being eternally optimistic and thinking, it's not a big deal for me to round up a little bit because we're going to get there anyway. It's, maybe we only have 8,000, well, we'll get the 10,000 in a week. So it's not a big deal.
Right.
And being delusional. Right. And then committing fraud. That's the big leap. It's the big leap.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Okay. So,
I sort of want to call out here as it relates to the founder is, it makes me think about the women founders who made some mistakes, some culture mistakes. I think about Audrey at The Wing. I think about Ty Henry at Outdoor Voices. I think about, I'm blanking on her name, but the founder, CEO of Thinks, Steph Corey at Away. all of whom had, articles written about them and about like their potentially toxic culture. And all of whom then had to step down. But as you just said, Curtis is still running this company. Now, granted, this article just came out in the last week, so maybe in a month from now he won't be. But it does feel like, and I think we've said this before, it does feel like men get more chances. And so what I wonder is, which way should we be swinging the pendulum? Should we be swinging the pendulum towards anyone who's out here being toxic gets the treatment of, that's it, we're getting rid of you? Or should we be swinging the pendulum that everyone gets a second chance or a third chance? Because being a founder is hard and being a CEO is hard, and you're going to make some mistakes, and like, you should get to learn from your mistakes. I just wonder where we think that pendulum should be.
I think it depends on how egregious the mistakes are. Like, I don't think Elizabeth Holmes needs another chance, woman or not. I don't think this Frank founder needs another chance, woman or not. And I think if what is being said is true, and we'll see what happens in court, I don't think this guy Curtis deserves another chance. Now, whether he has this, to some extent, people have different degrees of shame, right? Like, he might be able to stick it out and maybe Daylight will still be successful. Does that mean that he shouldn't have more shame? No, Donald Trump made it through his presidency miraculously because he had no shame, whereas Hillary Clinton had a bit more shame. I mean, she probably would have stuck through all of the all the scandals around her, which I'm not going to compare to the ones around Donald Trump, even though it may sound like I just did. But my point is, I do think there is something to the level of shame you have. And like, yeah, you can weather the storm if you have none. Like, we've clearly learned that in the past few years. Right. Is that how it should be? Probably not if you're engaged in fraud. Like, I think that's the clear line for me. Probably not. Yeah. Should some of these other folks have gotten additional chances? Maybe. If they could learn from it. Yeah. I do increasingly think that people should be able to learn from their mistakes, but it has to be a genuine desire to learn. And I think what's hard is for outsiders to judge how genuine that desire to learn and be better is.
Yeah. I think some of it is, just speaking from my own experience and how much I've been able to learn and grow and get better. Some of it is, one of the perks of my company not growing as quickly as these other companies have, right? Like, when you're still sub 20 million in revenue, investors will let you make a few mistakes, but I think when we're talking about The Wing and we're talking about Away and these companies making hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, there's more on the line. I think the scrutiny does get that much more severe. But also, because you're a woman, I think the scrutiny gets that much more severe. But I agree with you. I think fraud is an obvious bright line. I don't think you should get multiple chances to do fraud. But I think if what we're talking about here is a culture problem and you not doing a good enough job as a CEO, or potentially doing a bad job as a CEO creating a positive work environment, I tend to think maybe you should get another chance at that, because it's not easy. I think a lot of people can say what it is they want from a culture. Like, everyone wants it to be positive and everyone wants it to be collaborative and everyone wants it to be supportive. But I think very few people, if given the chance, would know exactly how to create and nurture that sort of environment. It's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, I think organizations, and I'm a little bit biased because I that was my major in college, which is weird, but like organizational sociology, right? Organizations are themselves like their own being, right? Right. And once you put a group of people together and you expect them to work in a certain way, like, that is its own thing. And if you've never put one of those together before, even if you as an individual have all of the best intent and think you know how to operate yourself in a fair way, it doesn't mean that this thing that has taken off and is now its own being will do that, right? You need to learn how to create culture values amongst the organization, how to create boundaries for the organization. And I agree, that totally takes time and practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And the final thing that at least I will say that comes to mind when I think about specifically about this founder, which is very interesting to me, is it feels a little bit like, in reading some of the quotes that his employees said, him using their dead name, and him, not respecting sort of like their boundaries around identity. It sounds like his marginalized status as a gay man, in some ways blinded him or prevented him from being sensitive to other marginalized communities on his team. And it's so interesting because you would think like, oh, I'm marginalized, you're marginalized, like this is something that I understand and we can even relate on. But I have seen that in different communities where someone feels like my oppression is the oppression, and therefore it's hard for me to really wrap my mind around your form of oppression, or to be particularly sensitive to your form of oppression, because I'm dealing with my own. And that is always kind of, I don't know, it's always kind of weird to me, but I get it, because you're sort of like wrapped up in your own thing.
Well, also, I think everyone is the main character of their own life.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Like that's what I feel like you're saying. And I think it blinds people in both directions in this example, right? Like it may have blinded him to the, sensitivities of the employees around him. For the employees who are offended by his actions, now, not all of them, because some of them seem extremely egregious, but maybe using a dead name or whatever it is, like maybe he didn't know. Maybe he genuinely didn't know that the person's dead name versus chosen name. I don't know. But I think I'm increasingly, as I am a leader at a company more and more, I think sometimes employees underestimate or put a lot of pressure on leaders to know every little sensitivity that they have without communicating it.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes can be unfair. Now, this guy, again, because of the Slack messages that have been sent, like maybe that's probably not what the issue was here.
Yeah.
And, passing out like edibles or whatever it is at a company, like that's just a bad idea. As a CEO, it's really a bad idea. So I'm not going to like forgive everything he's done. But in general, I think there is a takeaway here for any company where their culture doesn't seem to be great. Like communication is key,
Totally.
Especially for an inexperienced leader who may not know, like that he needs to be informed, or she needs to be informed of like what is going wrong to be able to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. It made me think of, over the holidays, a family friend of ours, the whole family came over, and one of our family friends has come out as actually, I don't think they said non-binary. I think they said non-gender conforming. And I think maybe those two things are different. I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but I remember being prepped for this. Right. I was told ahead of time. And I remember being like, okay, I am going to get this right. Like, I am not going to use the wrong pronouns. Like cause it's important to me. And so, but then we were all standing around like drinking wine, and I was telling a story. And, when I tell stories, I'm gesturing and I'm whatever. And then I was like, girl, let me tell you. And it just, that is a phrase that I use so frequently that I said it, and then I continued my story, and then I was like, oh my God. But this person had moved on, and the whole party had moved on. So now I was like, well, now do I bring it back up? Is that worse? And I just spent the whole night in agony. And now I'm like making it about me. This is about this person, right? But the point is, I wanted so badly to get it right. But in that moment, I still like was a creature of habit. And I can imagine that at least some of what maybe happened for Curtis around misgendering or using a dead name, if it's the name that I guess was introduced to him by, I could imagine that at least some of it was very innocent. But the question is, what do you do next? Right? Like, okay, you made a mistake. what do you do next? And I have to believe you wouldn't have all of these employees filing full on lawsuits if the behavior didn't continue to be egregious. But yeah, I still think about that. It like kills me to think that I'm supposed to be an ally. Right. And like, so I just, I don't know that that's relevant to this at all, but it is.
I think the point is people should get second chances. Right. And if you mean well, people should get second chances. Well. And do we think that's different for CEO founders? I say not necessarily. But but there's a difference between an innocent misstep and fraud. I'm going to still come back to fraud. And that you shouldn't get a second chance for.
100%. Well, what about part two? What do we think all of this that we've learned says about the business itself, or what do we just think about the business itself? Because I will say for my part, when I first heard about this bank, I did have trouble wrapping my mind around the idea of what is it that a LGBT-focused bank can do for the LGBT community that's going to make it so much better or different, particularly even when you were going through some of the problems that they face versus some of the rewards or the differences that the bank purported to give. Like 20% or less likely to own stocks. You said, they're 20% less likely to have a savings account. But then if we look at what the bank was offering, it was a seamless card issuance process. Okay, but how does that deal with the 20% less likely to get banks, right? Or to be banked? Or I can put my chosen name on a card, but there's still 20% of the community who doesn't have a credit card. So it almost like didn't connect for me, the problem and the solution.
Yeah, I don't think it connected for Daylight either, which is why they're not growing Daylight Money as an independent product anymore, right? And why they've now shifted to Daylight Grow, although it's unclear what the numbers look like there either. I mean, the interesting thing about tech is that with tech and the ability to launch entire businesses, like launching an entire banking service on top of an existing bank more quickly and more affordably than before the idea of neobanks existed, that enables focusing in on a particular population. Like Daylight's not the only new neobank that focuses on a particular population. You have Greenwood, which is focusing on creating generational wealth for Black and Latino communities. You have Purpose Bank and One and Aspiration that are focusing on addressing or targeting individuals who really believe in climate change, right? You have Majority, which is a neobank that's focusing on building financial tools for immigrants. Like there is something to tech enabling a really individualized experience because it's now less costly to build an entire suite of services. But I think the problem with Daylight Money, or what it seems like they encountered, is this mismatch of problem and solution. Right. Like exactly what you said. If one of the issues with that the LGBT community experiences when it comes to traditional banking is they face discrimination in mortgages and loans, well, then your product should address mortgages and loans, not just what the name on your debit card is.
Right.
And that's what it seems like Daylight missed, at least initially.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. It's not that I don't believe in banking for specific communities. It's that I had trouble wrapping my mind around whether this solution was solving the banking needs, specific banking needs of the LGBT community. And I recall reading in the New York Magazine article that as of June of last year, Curtis said they had essentially no revenue. So which would suggest to me that the banking thing was not working out. It makes sense that they therefore pivoted to Daylight Grow. So, I'm curious to see how that goes.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Now I need to move. Oh, coming. Oh, so annoying. Okay. So KJ, what is your verdict here?
Well, I guess it's two things. The first is, as it relates to this particular founder and CEO, like I said, some of what he said in those Slack messages and how he phrased things, to me, says a lot about his character and tells me this is not someone who's ready to be CEO. And I don't say that lightly. I don't like passing judgment on other founders and CEOs, but it just really doesn't sound like this is a fit for him right now. But as it relates to the company, we'll see how things go. But I hope that this particular article and the legal troubles and everything else doesn't make it harder for the next LGBT-focused startup, because obviously this is an important community with specific needs. And I want to see this community thrive, and I want to see LGBT founders thrive. So I hope this doesn't make that harder. What about you? What's your verdict?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I hope it doesn't make the next LGBT-focused company that means well. I hope it doesn't hamper their growth. Mm-hmm. I think I really feel like the jury is out, quite literally, in the legal battle and for the company as a whole. Clearly they found investors who believe in this daylight grow. On paper, if you're just looking at the promise for the company, I think it makes sense, helping queer-focused families or queer families grow. That makes sense. I hope they're not actually just taking advantage of vulnerable populations to enable that business to flourish. That would be pretty horrible. But again, without really understanding the numbers behind the business, and we don't know them, without knowing more than just those few Slack messages, it's hard to say good or bad overall. I will wait a little bit more. I guess I'm passing. Well, it's kind of it's not the point, but I'm going to pass a little bit.
Well, all right. There you have it.
Okay, it's time for Judge and Jury, and we're taking a slightly different approach this week. We are talking about AI headshots. Mm-hmm. KJ and I both recently got some headshots done by a company called Try It on AI. You may have seen it on TikTok. KJ's even gone so far as to use one on her website. So mm-hmm. The question is, good or bad judgment to use AI headshots?
Yeah. Well, let me caveat this by saying I put this particular AI headshot on one landing page that we are sending out to a very small group of people. And it's at the bottom. So it was more because I was like, I've got these headshots. I want to use them somewhere. But yeah, so is it good judgment or bad judgment? For one thing, I think it's just fun,
so fun.
We didn't mention you get 100 headshots for $17. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is just cool. And the way it works is you upload 10 to 20 selfies of yourself. They have to be recent photos. And then, in the matter of, they say it can take up to 10 hours. I think mine took something like that, maybe 8 to 10. You get a folder of 100 photos, and you didn't pose for any of them. And they're mm-hmm. different backgrounds and different outfits and different hairstyles and different mood lighting. It's very cool. So, I mean, mm-hmm. just to see it, I think is cool, but to actually use the headshots, I guess the way I'm thinking about it is this. I would use these headshots in a low stakes way. So mm-hmm. my social media avatar on some random social media site, to me, that's low stakes. Okay. So I don't mind throwing it up there. Like I said, this landing page that a few people are going to go to, throwing it on the bottom of that. I don't mind that, but I'm not going to put it on my LinkedIn profile. I'm not going to put it on, if I'm doing a public speaking event, that's not the headshot I'm going to send, because it's not quite me. It looks a lot like me. Looks like a very beautiful, slightly slimmer version of me, but it's not quite me. So I'm sort of, it's, you know, it's that founder mentality. I am kind of figuring out my blurry lines of where will I, where won't I? But I don't think it's bad judgment if you've got some sort of discernment around when to use them and when not to. But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think this is fraud, so I think you can go ahead and use it.
Not fraud.
I mean, taking a step back, I was even hesitating, like, should I be doing this? Should I be uploading 10 or 20 pictures of myself? Like, is this just going to make it that much easier for someone to steal my identity? Right? Because, like, more recent, you know, for those who don't know, I'm in the fintech space. I've designed, like, a know your customer onboarding flow. And part of that flow, if we can't verify certain pieces of your identity, we use a service that asks you to both upload your state ID and take a selfie. And so I'm wondering, I'm like, oh, have I just made it that much easier for people to use my photo?
I didn't think of that.
Now, ultimately,
Oh
yes, you should, if you haven't already deleted the photos you've uploaded, you should delete it. I mean, it's gone now. They're gone. But it's done. I ended up deciding it's still worth it because given my age, like there are enough pictures of me just out on the internet, you know, that exist without me using the service. So I think, like, fine, it's fine. So I've gotten over that and decided it's still okay judgment to use the service period. Now, to use the actual headshot, I think it's okay. I mean, I do think you should poll people around you to decide if it is really you. And I think people are doing this on, or not is really you, how closely it looks like to you.
Right.
Because you won't get the same answers from people. And I think the way to pick the photo that is, like, least of a lie and most just, like, a little bit of embellishment, like a headshot might be because there is airbrushing involved, is to get others' opinions. Yeah. Right? Like, what we've seen on the TikTok trend is people don't know what is and isn't them, right? They're like, I think this one looks like me. And I was like, that doesn't look like you. And they're like, this one looks nothing like me. And they're like, it's exactly you, you know? Yeah. So, and it was interesting to see my, like, niece's reaction, my sister's reaction, Tom's reaction. Out of 100, I think I got 2 that I could use, and I might use them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I got 2, maybe 3 that I could pass off and people would be like, oh yeah, that's you. And then I got a few more that I love, but that are definitively not me. So I do think good judgment, if for no other reason, to have, like, as a backup. Like, every now and then you just need a headshot. And I have found a lot of times when people find themselves needing a headshot, they don't have one, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think it's good.
I haven't had a professional headshot done since I was an associate at a law firm. That was years ago. I don't look like that anymore. Now, granted, I did feed this AI machine a few pictures from pre-pregnancy. So maybe that's why some of the pictures were so off, because it was like, I don't know who this person is. But yeah, it's hard. You know, I don't want to go pay a ton of money for more professional headshots. This service, I think, is solid. And if you need something, most likely it'll give you 1 or 2 pictures that I think are usable. So yeah, I say good judgment too.
Hooray! Excuse me, I'm just writing this down. And leave us a 5-star review.
And be sure to follow us on social. I'm Danny DMC on TikTok, and KJ is on. Okay.